Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by vast forests and mountains, there was a young man named Haruto. Although his life seemed peaceful and simple, he felt an inner restlessness that followed him day after day. The constant noise of his thoughts, the search for a purpose, and the desire to find peace kept him away from the present. Haruto, like many of us, longed to find serenity but didn't know how to achieve it. In his mind, questions piled up. How can I find inner peace? What does it mean to live in the present moment? Calm seemed unattainable. One afternoon, after meditating on his concerns, he decided to seek answers at the Zen monastery located high in the mountains. He had heard stories about how the practice of Zen, meditation, and detachment could help free oneself from anxiety and stress. Perhaps I will find what I am searching for here, he thought as he ventured into the forest. Upon arriving at the monastery, he was greeted by an elderly monk with a serene face, whose presence radiated peace. "Welcome, young one," the monk said with a gentle smile. "If you come seeking answers, you must be willing to listen, to let go of what no longer serves you, and to learn to be present in each moment." Haruto, curious but also a bit nervous, sat before the monk, waiting for him to offer the wisdom he longed for. The monk gazed at him intently and said, "Peace is not something you can find outside of yourself, young one. Peace is in the stillness of the mind, in the simplicity of the present moment. If you wish to learn how to calm your thoughts and find serenity, you must first learn to release expectations. The journey to peace begins when you let go of everything that binds you." These words resonated deeply in Haruto's heart. Suddenly, he understood that his search for peace had been hindered by his own expectations and desires. Perhaps the first step was not to search more, but to stop clinging to what he could not control. "How can I do this?" Haruto asked, his voice filled with emotion. The monk smiled again and, pointing to the wind gently blowing through the trees, replied, "Listen to the wind. Listen to how it flows effortlessly, without trying to be something it is not. The wind does not resist. It simply is. What I ask of you is to observe the wind as a lesson for your life. Learn to flow with life without resistance or expectations. True peace is found when you stop fighting and allow things to be as they are." Haruto remained silent, watching the wind move through the leaves of the trees. In his mind, the monk's words echoed deeply, "Flow with life, without resistance or expectations." For several minutes, he only heard the sound of the wind and the whisper of nature around him. Suddenly, he realized that his mind was beginning to calm, in a subtle yet profound way. There was no need to do anything but be there in that moment. The monk, noticing the change in Haruto, said, "What you feel now is what we call the power of the present. Peace is not found in the future or the past. It only exists in the here and now. Each breath, each sensation, each thought that passes is an opportunity to be present. Do not seek beyond what you have in this instant." Haruto nodded slowly, feeling that something inside him was beginning to transform. He finally understood that the anxiety and stress he had carried for so long were not something he could eliminate immediately, but he could choose how to respond to them. He could choose to release the expectations of what his life should be and instead embrace what it already was. "How can I apply this in my daily life?" Haruto asked, eager to learn more. The monk looked at him gently and said, "The first step is to accept what is without judgment. Instead of resisting challenges, embrace them. Every difficulty is an opportunity to practice detachment, to release what disturbs you and return to the present. In doing so, you will realize that peace does not depend on external circumstances, but on how you choose to live in harmony with them." Haruto spent several days at the monastery, practicing meditation and observing the flow of the wind. Each day, his mind cleared a little more, and although not all of his worries disappeared immediately, he began to feel a subtle calm he had never experienced before. One day, while walking through the monastery garden, the monk approached him and asked, "How do you feel now, Haruto?" "I am beginning to understand," the young man replied with a shy smile. "Peace is not something I can find outside of myself, but something that arises when I stop resisting what is. The wind has taught me to flow." The monk nodded and said, "Exactly. Inner peace is a state of consciousness. It is not a destination, but a constant journey. When you learn to flow with life, to release control, you will experience what the ancient masters called the silence of the heart. This silence is the source of true peace. From this silence, every action is serene, every word is gentle, and every thought is clear." Haruto meditated on these words as he gazed at the still waters of the pond. For days, he had been seeking an external answer, but the monk's lesson had been clear. Peace was not in what he did, but in how he lived each moment. As he delved deeper into the practice, he understood that moments of stillness were the most powerful. In those moments of silence, he could hear life itself. That night, as Haruto prepared for sleep, the monk approached him again. "Do not forget this, young one. Peace is not a goal to reach, but a way of being. True serenity comes from recognizing that everything is in its place, that everything is part of the natural flow of life. Do not fight against what you cannot change. Instead, accept it, and you will see how everything falls into place." That night, Haruto stayed thinking about the monk's words while gazing at the stars through the window of his room. The sky was clear, and the distant lights seemed to speak in silence, as if the universe itself were whispering an ancient truth. "Peace is in everything around us," he thought. "It is in the wind, in the stars, in the simple act of breathing." The next day, the monk proposed a different exercise. "Today, I want you to walk through the forest," he said. "No rush, no goals. Just walk and be aware of every step you take. If you encounter thoughts, observe them without clinging to them. If discomfort arises, accept it as part of the process. Allow everything to flow without resistance." Haruto, intrigued but a little skeptical, accepted the task. As he walked along the path covered with golden leaves, at first he felt strange. The idea of walking without thinking about reaching somewhere felt difficult. His mind began to wander toward the future, toward the worries he had left behind in his village. But he remembered the monk's words, "Do not fight against what you cannot change." So he decided to simply be aware of each step. As he progressed, something began to happen. His breath became deeper and calmer. The trees around him were no longer just a landscape but a living presence, a reminder of the stillness he could find within himself. The branches creaked softly with the wind, and Haruto felt as though the entire forest was breathing with him. Suddenly, he understood. Peace did not require effort. He didn't need to search for it or achieve it. It was there, available at all times. He just needed to be present to recognize it. Peace is in every moment, he understood, in every step, in every breath. He returned to the monastery, where the monk was waiting for him with a smile. "How did it go?" he asked. "It was transformative," Haruto replied. "I could see how peace is not in the place I want to reach, but in every step of the way. I no longer seek something outside of myself. Now I know that serenity is in being aware of the moment." "Exactly," said the monk, nodding slowly. "The path has no end. Peace is the very nature of our existence. When we allow ourselves to be carried by the flow of life, Without clinging to what was or anticipating what is to come, we find what was always there, the serenity of the present. As the days went by, Haruto delved even deeper into his practice. The monk taught him that peace was not something that could be achieved through effort, but through the full acceptance of the present moment. The Zen path is not one of perfection, the monk explained one day as they walked through the monastery garden. It is a path of detachment and compassion, a path in which you learn to release what no longer serves you and embrace what is. Haruto began to understand that everything he had believed about life was based on the idea that he had to achieve something, a goal, an accomplishment, a target. However, life was not a race. Every moment, every breath, had its own value, and in its simplicity lay its beauty. One afternoon, while meditating by the pond, Haruto realized something profound. He didn't need to change to be happy. He didn't need more things or a different life. Peace did not depend on what happened in the outside world, but on how he chose to see the world. At that moment, the monk approached him and said, "You have learned the most important lesson, Haruto. Serenity is not in the circumstances, but in how you face them. If you accept impermanence, you will see that everything that happens is part of a natural cycle, and in that flow you will find true well-being." Haruto looked at the clear water of the pond and saw how the small ripples expanded with each movement, as if the water itself were showing the continuous flow of life. Everything in the universe moved, changed, and evolved. Nothing remained the same, but that impermanence was not something to fear, but something to accept. It was part of what gave life to everything that existed. "Exactly," said the monk, as if reading his thoughts. "Change is inevitable, and sometimes we cling to what no longer serves us. But when you learn to let go, to not resist, you see that life moves forward, effortlessly, without resentment. Only with acceptance, everything flows." As the weeks passed, Haruto's transformation became increasingly evident. He was no longer the restless young man filled with anxiety who had arrived at the monastery. His face reflected a deep calm, and his eyes shone with a serenity that only those who have found peace can experience. One day, while walking through the forest to gather firewood for the monastery, he came across a river that had overflowed due to recent rains. The water, which normally flowed gently, was now rushing forcefully, carrying branches and leaves along its path. Haruto stopped to observe the river, and for a moment, a feeling of fear overtook him. The water seemed out of control, chaotic, out of place. However, at that moment, he remembered the teachings of the monk. Impermanence. Everything changes, everything flows. The river, though turbulent at that moment, would eventually return to its calm. Just like his thoughts, which at times overflowed, but always returned to their center. Haruto sat by the river and closed his eyes, letting the sound of the water surround him. He remembered what the monk had said: "The silence of the heart is only found when you let chaos be just part of the flow of life." The young man understood that life was not a succession of perfectly ordered moments. Sometimes chaos was necessary for renewal. The natural flow of life included both calm and storm, and both were essential for balance. Suddenly, he felt a deep connection with the river. It wasn't just the water that flowed, but also he himself. Just like the river, he too went through turbulent moments, but that didn't mean he had lost his essence. The river, with its power and calm, was a reflection of his own being. Haruto stood up with a new understanding. He now knew that the difficulties he faced were not something to avoid, but something to accept as part of his journey. Peace didn't mean being free of difficulties, but being able to face them with a calm mind and a serene heart. Time continued to pass, and Haruto gradually transformed more and more into the serene presence the monk had described. He no longer sought answers. Instead, he lived each day with full awareness, embracing whatever came with acceptance and without resistance. The anxiety that had accompanied him for so long had disappeared, replaced by a deep sense of peace and gratitude for what he was. One morning, upon waking, the monk called him. "Today is a good day to meditate together in silence," he said, pointing to the path that led to the top of the mountain. Although Haruto had practiced a lot, he understood that every opportunity to meditate with the monk was another lesson, a chance to be more in tune with nature and with himself. At the top of the mountain, surrounded only by the blue sky and the vastness of the landscape, the monk said, "The peace you have found is not something you can lose. The present is your home, and whenever you return to it, you return to your true nature." Haruto sat in silence beside the monk, with no hurry, no expectations. The two looked at the horizon, where the sun began to rise slowly, illuminating the mountains in a soft, golden glow. It was a perfect moment of serenity, a moment Haruto knew he would never forget. That day, for the first time, he did not think about the future or what he still had left to learn. He was simply there, being part of the whole, at peace with life as it was. Haruto's journey, which had begun with a mind full of doubts and worries, had come to an end. However, he knew that the journey toward inner peace had no clear endpoint. It was a continuous path, one that was lived in every breath, every step, every present moment. "Now I know," he thought as he looked at the mountains. "Peace has always been here at the heart of the present."